I still remember the exact moment I arrived at my son Daniel's wedding, and I suspect I will remember it for the rest of my life. The air was warm, humming with music and laughter spilling out from the decorated hall, the kind of joyful atmosphere that should only exist on days meant for new beginnings. Guests stepped out of their cars dressed beautifully, greeting one another with hugs, compliments, and bright smiles. They posed for photos beneath the archway of white roses, their faces glowing with anticipation for the ceremony. Everything seemed touched by happiness, everything except the silence resting in my chest. I had spent hours preparing myself before leaving home. Not to impress anyone, not to reclaim a role I no longer held in the family's eyes, but simply because I wanted Daniel to see that I cared. Even after years of distance, even after all the misunderstandings, the arguments, the accusations he carried like scars from a past he refused to examine. I wore the necklace his father had given me on our 10th anniversary, a delicate piece, small but meaningful. I hoped Daniel might notice it and remember that I had once been the center of his world. That I had raised him alone after tragedy shattered our family. That my love, though battered by rejection, had not disappeared. I walked toward the entrance slowly, trying to steady my breath. For one fleeting second, as I saw Daniel standing near the doorway in his suit, checking his watch, I allowed myself to imagine something beautiful. Maybe he was waiting for me. Maybe his arms would open the moment he saw me. Maybe he would say he couldn't start his wedding day without knowing his mother was there. It was the kind of hope that slips into a heart even when it knows better. But the moment his eyes met mine, everything changed. His expression hardened instantly. The warmth that had once lived in his gaze, warmth I could still remember from when he was a child, evaporated like mist under a cruel sun. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. Instead, he stepped forward with the stiff posture of someone bracing for an inconvenience. When he lifted his hand, stopping me as though preventing a stranger from walking too far, the humiliation was sharp enough to steal my breath. "Mom," he said, his voice clipped and sharp. "What are you doing here?" The words hit me with a force I hadn't expected. My throat tightened. My instinct was to explain myself gently, to soothe him the way I had so many times when he was young. "Daniel," I said, keeping my voice steady, "it's your wedding. I came to see my son get married." He inhaled sharply, irritation rising like a wave he didn't bother to hide. "I didn't invite you," he said. He didn't whisper it. He didn't say it privately. He said it loudly enough for the people near us to hear. The entire family agreed. "You don't belong. Not today. Not anymore. Please leave." For a moment, the world tilted under my feet. I wasn't sure if it was from shock or heartbreak, perhaps both. The family agreed? His uncles, his cousins, his fiancé's relatives, people who had eaten my food, celebrated holidays in my home, leaned on me in times of need, they all agreed I didn't belong? And Daniel, my only child, the boy I had nursed through fevers, the boy I held during nightmares, the boy I had fought to protect after his father died, was looking at me with eyes that held nothing but cold dismissal. People around us shifted uncomfortably. Some lowered their gazes. Others whispered behind their hands. A few even smirked, as though they had been waiting for this kind of spectacle. No one stepped forward. No one spoke up. In that moment, I was entirely alone. "Daniel," I said quietly, "whatever you think I did, whatever anger you're carrying, we can talk about it after the ceremony. Let me be here for you today. Just today." "No," he said, his voice firm and final. "You being here will ruin everything. Please leave. Now." The humiliation wrapped around me like a cold wind, stealing the last remnants of hope. But I forced myself to remain composed. A mother learns, after enough heartbreak, to protect her dignity even when her heart is shattering. I straightened my shoulders and nodded. "All right, Daniel," I whispered. "I'll go." Then, before turning away, I added quietly, "But don't forget to check your phone." A flicker of confusion crossed his features, but he quickly masked it with irritation, turning toward his guests as if brushing away a problem he no longer wished to acknowledge. I walked back toward the parking lot, my steps steady despite the storm raging inside me. Only when I reached my car did the tears finally break free. They came hot and fast, blurring my vision as my hands trembled against the steering wheel. The ache was so deep it felt like a physical wound. How had my love become a burden to him? When had I stopped being his mother and become someone he could discard without hesitation? Yet there was something Daniel didn't know. Something none of them knew. Something I had kept hidden for years, because the truth had its own timing. And that timing had finally arrived. The message waiting on his phone, the one I had scheduled to be delivered minutes after our conversation, contained a truth he had spent years avoiding. A truth that would unravel everything he believed about our family. A truth his father had recorded before he died, asking me to guard it until Daniel was ready. As I sat there in the parking lot, trembling from the confrontation, I whispered to myself, he has no idea what's coming. And it was true. He didn't.
Not yet.
If you're listening to my story, tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if you've ever been rejected by someone you love. Sharing it doesn't erase the pain, but it reminds us that we aren't alone in it. And as I finally started the engine and drove away from the hall, one thought echoed inside me, painful, steady, and strangely empowering. This was not the end. This was the beginning of the truth. As I drove away from the wedding hall, my vision blurred, but my mind grew strangely clear. Pain has a way of sharpening every small detail and every memory. Daniel's rejection echoed in my head as if replaying in slow motion, his voice cold and his eyes refusing to see me as anything other than a disturbance. I kept hearing the same sentence over and over. You don't belong anymore. Those words hit harder than anything he had said in the past. They carried a finality I was not prepared for. Yet, even with my heart breaking, I reminded myself that he had no idea what was waiting for him on his phone. The truth often moves quietly until the moment it decides to reveal itself. I parked a few streets away from the venue. I needed air or silence, or maybe simply a space where no one could see me falling apart. Inside the car, the quiet felt thick and heavy. I stared at my phone long enough to see the notification appear. Delivered. Just one simple word, but it carried a weight that could shift an entire life. The message I had scheduled was not a message of anger. It was not written to hurt him. It was the opposite. It was the truth he had refused to hear for years. A truth he needed to face before it was too late. I placed the phone face down on the passenger seat and leaned back. That was when memories I had buried deep began pushing toward the surface. Not memories about Daniel's adult years or the bitterness that had grown between us. Older memories. Shadows of the night he confronted me in the kitchen when he was 23. He had been angry about something I said regarding his father. He believed I kept secrets to control him. He believed I lied about the circumstances of his father's death. He believed what others whispered without knowing the truth. That night, he stormed out of the house, and the door slammed so loudly that several frames fell from the wall. From that day forward, he never looked at me through the same lens again. When the wedding invitation never came, I already suspected where I stood in his life. Still, I held on to hope. Hope is stubborn like that. It grows roots even in soil that can no longer nourish it. As I sat quietly in my car, I watched a couple walk past holding hands. They were laughing and pointing at decorations near the entrance. I wondered if Daniel had laughed like that earlier. I wondered if he had felt even a flicker of guilt for what he had done to me. But guilt was not a language he spoke often. For many years, silence had been easier for him to maintain than understanding. Then my phone vibrated. The screen lit up with a message from an old friend who knew I planned to attend the wedding. She wrote asking how it went and if Daniel had spoken to me. I could not bring myself to answer. How do you explain that the child you raised alone had turned you into a stranger at the door of his own celebration? Instead, I set my phone down again and closed my eyes. The ache in my chest pulsed slowly, but beneath the pain, I felt something else. Not anger. Something more like resolve. Because Daniel could pretend he no longer needed me, but the truth was already moving toward him. He would hear his father's voice today. Not the version he remembered from his childhood, but the final message recorded when his father knew he was running out of time. A message Daniel should have heard years ago, but refused to listen to. A message I had guarded because his father asked me to share it only when Daniel was ready. And the moment Daniel pushed me away at his wedding entrance, I knew he was finally ready. Not because he was mature enough, but because he had gone as far as he could in the wrong direction. I started the car and drove toward the small park where Daniel used to play when he was little. The swings were old and rusted, but still standing. The bench where his father once sat reading stories was under the same tree. I parked and walked toward that bench, letting the memories wash over me like a tide I could no longer resist. I sat down and felt the rough wood beneath my fingers. For a moment, I allowed myself to feel everything I had been holding back. The disappointment, the loneliness, the weight of carrying secrets that were never meant to be light. Then my phone chimed again. A new message. This time the name on the screen froze me. Daniel. My stomach tightened as I opened the message. 3 words appeared. Where are you? I stared at them for several seconds. Not long ago, he had told me I did not belong in his life. Now he was searching for me. I waited a moment before writing back. I am at the park. Sit with me if you want. I sent the message before fear could make me second-guess it. His reply came quickly. I am coming. Please wait. I sat on that bench feeling the evening breeze brush past me. I thought of the recording again. His father had spoken with a voice filled with love but shadowed by fear. He had shared things Daniel never imagined. Things Daniel blamed me for because he did not know the truth. Hearing his father's voice would undo years of anger in a single moment. Pain does that. It exposes the false stories we build to protect ourselves. Before long, I heard footsteps on the path. Daniel appeared at the edge of the park, walking with the urgency of someone searching for answers. His suit jacket was wrinkled, and his eyes were swollen. He looked lost. When he reached me, he slowed down, as if unsure whether he was allowed to sit. I nodded, and he took the spot beside me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, Mom, I am sorry. I did not respond at first. Sometimes apologies are too heavy to answer immediately. Then I said, Daniel, you listened. That alone means more than you know. He turned toward me, and I saw the confusion and guilt swirling together. He said he had listened to the entire recording many times, and every time felt like another blow to his chest. He told me he never knew his father had left a message. He told me he never guessed how much truth had been hidden from him. And then he said the words I had waited so long to hear. I blamed you for everything. And I was wrong. I placed my hand gently on his. His voice broke as he said he wanted to fix things and that he wanted to explain the truth to the guests. I could see he meant it, but I also knew he was overwhelmed. Daniel, I said quietly, not everything needs to happen tonight. This is your wedding day. Do not let grief rewrite it completely. We will rebuild, but one step at a time. He nodded slowly. I walked him back toward the venue, but when we reached the door, I stopped. Tonight is not the night for me to return inside, I told him. He looked disappointed, but accepted what I said. He hugged me tightly, and for the first time in many years, I felt my son truly holding on to me rather than keeping me away. When I drove home later that night, I felt relief, but I also felt something else. A growing sense that the truth Daniel heard was only the beginning. There was more hidden beneath the surface. More than he or I had ever acknowledged. And I was right. Because the next morning his wife called me with fear in her voice, saying Daniel had not slept and he kept replaying the recording. She said he was asking questions she did not understand. She asked me to come immediately. That was when I knew. The hardest part of the truth was still ahead. When I reached Daniel's house that morning, I felt a heaviness in the air before I even stepped inside. His wife Elena opened the door with trembling hands. Her eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying for hours. She led me through the hallway, without speaking, and the silence itself made my heart race. Something had shifted inside Daniel. Something the recording awakened that he had never expected to face. When we reached the study, I saw him sitting on the floor, against the far wall. His phone was beside him, playing the recording again on low volume. He looked like someone who had been pulled out of sleep and dropped into a nightmare. His hair was messy and his eyes were unfocused, as if he had not slept at all. He lifted his head slowly when I entered. Mom, he whispered. Why didn't you tell me? he didn't die the way everyone said. I felt the air leave my lungs. The question I had feared for so many years had finally come. I walked toward him and sat down beside him on the floor. His breathing was shallow. His hands trembled, and he kept rubbing his forehead like he was trying to press the truth back out of his skull. Daniel, I said gently, there were things your father asked me to keep from you because he believed knowing too soon would harm you. You were young and grieving and angry, and you would not have been able to carry what he wanted to say. Your father was not perfect. He made choices that weighed heavily on him, choices that shaped the last months of his life. He did not want those choices to define your memories of him. He looked at me with a mixture of pain and disbelief. But Mom, he said, why did he say his death wasn't what everyone thought? I closed my eyes for a moment, gathering strength. Because your father didn't die in peace. He died under pressure from people he trusted, people who betrayed him. Daniel stared at me as if waiting for me to say it was all a misunderstanding. But it was not. He was involved with an organization he believed was helping families. At first it was everything he wanted to be part of. A place where he felt useful. A place with real purpose. But then he discovered the truth. Money was being stolen from vulnerable people. Funds meant for charity were being diverted to private accounts. He confronted them, and they warned him to stay silent. Daniel stood up abruptly, pacing the room like a man trying to escape his own skin. Why didn't he leave? He asked in a strained voice. Why didn't he walk away? Because he believed leaving wouldn't erase the danger, I said quietly. He thought speaking out would put us at risk. And he thought staying silent was the only way to protect us. He carried that burden alone for months until it broke him. His heart didn't fail because of illness alone, Daniel. It failed because he was being hunted by the pressure of people who wanted him quiet. Daniel sank back down, lowering his head into his hands. I sat beside him and placed my hand on his shoulder. Your father asked me to keep that truth from you until he believed you were strong enough to understand. And every year I hoped the moment would come, but every year your anger grew. When you turned away from me, you were turning away from the only person who could have guided you through this truth. Daniel wiped his eyes. I blamed you, he whispered. I blamed you for everything. I know, I said. His voice cracked. And I made you carry that blame alone. I lifted his chin gently. Daniel, blame is heavy when it's placed on the wrong person. But now you know the truth. And the truth will either break you or set you free depending on what you choose next. He looked at me with a different expression now. Something fragile. Something honest. Mom, he said slowly, there's something else in the recording. Something he didn't say directly, but I felt it. Something about a warning. My heart clenched. There was more, yes. Something your father was afraid to name. Something he believed you would understand only when the danger resurfaced. Daniel swallowed hard. I felt like he was trying to warn me about a person. Someone close. Someone he trusted. As soon as he said that, my breath stopped. His father had said almost the same thing to me the night before he died. He had taken my hands and whispered, be careful. The betrayal isn't coming from strangers. It is coming from the one who stands closest. I had lived with those words buried inside me because for years it seemed the danger had faded. But hearing Daniel repeat that feeling made every old fear return. Daniel stepped closer. Mom, who was he talking about? I hesitated because the truth was a heavy stone I had avoided lifting for too long. Before I could answer, a soft knock echoed from the hallway. Elena opened the study door again, her face pale. There's someone here, she said. He asked for Daniel. He said he knew your father. Before Daniel could speak, a voice came from a hallway. A deep, calm voice that made my blood run cold. Daniel. It's been a long time. My entire body froze. That voice belonged to someone I hoped never to see again. Someone who had been close to my husband during those dark months. Someone who disappeared right after his death. Someone I once suspected but never confronted. Daniel looked at me confused. Mom, who is he? I whispered only one sentence. Daniel. Do not go out there alone. Elena stepped back as the man walked into the study. When he stepped into the light, the room felt smaller. His expression calm, his smile polite, but his eyes sharp. Eyes I remembered from the night my husband came home shaking after a meeting he refused to describe. He looked at Daniel with a practiced warmth. "You probably don't remember me," he said. "I was very close to your father. I came to offer my congratulations." Daniel stood rigid. "How did you know I got married yesterday?" The man shrugged lightly. "I keep track of the families that matter to him." His answer carried a quiet threat. I stepped forward, placing myself between them. "Daniel, this is the man your father warned us about." His smile faded. He turned his gaze toward me. "You always had a dramatic imagination," he said coldly. "You should be careful what you say." Daniel looked between us, realizing something dangerous was unfolding. I spoke again, keeping my voice steady. "Your father confronted him about the stolen money. He threatened to expose them. And this man told him to stay quiet. Told him consequences would come if he didn't." The man's jaw tightened. "You should stop," he said. "You don't understand what you are suggesting." But I did understand. And so did Daniel. He stepped forward, blocking the man's view of me. "You need to leave," he said firmly. "Now." The man exhaled slowly. "Very well," he said. "But be careful who you trust." He turned and walked out, leaving the door open behind him. Daniel collapsed into a chair, shaking. "Mom, what are we involved in?" I took his hands. "The truth," I said. "And we will face it together. The beginning of healing is honesty and courage. And now the path forward belonged to both of us." After the man walked out of the study, a tense silence settled over the room. Daniel sat with his elbows on his knees, his hands pressed against his forehead. He looked like someone who had stepped into a world he never knew existed. The weight of his father's warning, the appearance of that man, and the truth revealed in the recording all collided at once inside him. I watched him carefully, giving him space to breathe, but staying close enough for him to feel he was not alone. Elena stood near the door, unsure if she should leave or stay. Fear flickered in her eyes because she sensed something dark and dangerous had entered their lives. Daniel lifted his head slowly and looked at me. His voice was quiet. "Mom, I need to know everything. I need to understand what my father got himself into before he died." I nodded. There was no turning back now. The truth had been set in motion, and there was no safe place to hide anymore. We sat together on the floor where the walls felt close and the air heavy with secrets long buried. I began from the beginning. "Your father joined that organization because he believed in helping people. He thought he had found a place where he could use his skills for good. But behind the public image were people using charity as a facade to move money to private accounts. Your father noticed inconsistencies, and when he asked questions, they told him to keep quiet. At first, he believed it was a misunderstanding. But when he found documents proving their manipulation, he confronted them. That confrontation was the moment everything changed. He came home frightened that night, and he told me someone from the group tried to intimidate him." Daniel clenched his jaw. "The man who was here earlier?" I nodded. "He was one of the leaders. Your father trusted him until the day he realized they were using him to maintain the illusion of honesty. When he confronted them, that man told him that exposing the truth would destroy us. They knew where we lived. They knew your school. They knew everything. Your father carried that fear alone. He didn't want you to see him unstable or weak, so he kept it inside until it consumed him." Daniel stared at the floor. "I never knew he was scared. I thought he was strong and distant because of you." I shook my head gently. "He was strong, but he was terrified. He thought staying silent would keep us safe. But it destroyed him inside. The stress weakened his heart. The pressure broke him. He died carrying a weight no one should ever carry alone." Daniel closed his eyes. His breathing grew uneven as the truth settled through him. Then he opened them again and asked a question that made my heart tighten. "Why did the man come here today?" I hesitated because I had asked myself the same question from the moment he appeared. "I don't know for certain," I said. "But I do know this. He didn't come out of kindness. He didn't come to congratulate you. He came because the truth has surfaced. And he wants to control the narrative before it spreads." Daniel stood up and paced across the room. Each step was heavy with panic and confusion. "This is my wedding week," he muttered. "Why would anyone bring danger into my life now?" I watched him walk in circles, and I spoke softly. "Because the timing is not about you, Daniel. It is about what your father left behind. His message reached you. And as soon as you listened, the story changed. That man knows it. Daniel stopped walking and looked at me. Mom, what was my father protecting us from? What did he see that was so dangerous? I felt the old fear rise again, the fear that had lived inside me for years, even after I convinced myself the danger had passed. There were things he discovered, I said quietly. Things he never wrote down because he was afraid the evidence might be found. People using charity to move illegal money. People hiding criminal acts behind good intentions. And your father realized their reach was wider than he thought. When he tried to step away, they made it clear that silence was his only option. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. Why didn't you call the police? I met his eyes. Your father did. But the officer he trusted was already working with them. After that, he believed any attempt to expose the truth would only make things worse. And after your father died, I made the decision to protect you by staying quiet. Daniel looked at me with hurt in his eyes. You protected me by letting me blame you. By letting me hate you. I swallowed hard. Yes. Because if I had forced the truth onto you when you were angry, it would have pushed you deeper into the arms of people who were not safe. Daniel shook his head slowly, tears gathering in his eyes. Mom, I never knew. I thought you were the enemy. I thought you controlled everything. His voice broke. I am so ashamed. I reached for his hand. Shame is part of growth. What matters is that you are seeing the truth now. And we will face whatever comes next together. Elena stepped forward cautiously. What do we do now? She asked. Her voice trembled. Daniel looked at her, unsure how to answer. I spoke instead. The first thing we do is stay calm. Panic will only cloud our thinking. The second thing is we maintain distance from anyone connected to that man. No messages, no calls, no explanations. Daniel nodded, though fear still lingered in his eyes. Then he asked the question I had hoped he wouldn't ask, not yet. Mom, why did Dad say in the recording that he made a choice that caused his death? My breath caught. I remembered that line clearly. His father had said his death was the result of a choice he made. A choice that was never fully explained. I hesitated because this part of the truth was darker than everything that came before. Daniel watched me closely. Mom, what choice was he talking about? I took a slow breath. Your father chose to protect someone. Someone he believed was in immediate danger because of what he discovered. Someone the organization wanted to silence. Daniel blinked. Who? Who was he protecting? I answered quietly. A witness. Someone who knew what was happening. Someone who trusted your father when things spiraled out of control. He hid that person, gave them a safe place, and the organization found out. That was when everything escalated. They pressured him, followed him, threatened him, and when he refused to give in, his health deteriorated rapidly. Daniel stared at me, stunned. I never knew any of this. I nodded. You were a child. He wanted to keep your world safe. He wanted you to grow up without the weight of adult danger. Daniel lowered his voice. Is the witness still alive? I hesitated again. I don't know. After your father died, that person vanished without a trace. The room felt colder now as the truth continued to expand around us. Daniel sat back down, breathing deeply. This is too much, he whispered. But I need to know. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Then we will uncover it step by step. You are not alone in this, Daniel. That was when Daniel's phone vibrated on the floor. He picked it up and stared at the screen. His eyes widened with fear. Mom, he said in a shaky voice. It's him. Daniel stared at his phone screen for several seconds without moving. His face drained of color, and his hands shook so badly he nearly dropped the device. I felt my heart climb into my throat. I reached out gently. Daniel, what is it? He swallowed hard and turned the screen toward me. It was a message from the man who had visited earlier. It contained no greeting, no explanation, no signature. Just a single sentence. We need to talk. Daniel looked at me in panic. How did he get my number? Elena stepped closer. Her voice was barely above a whisper. Daniel, what does he want from you? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. But he's not supposed to have my number. This is not normal. I sat beside him and spoke calmly. Listen to me. Whatever he wants, you cannot meet him alone. Do not reply. Do not call. Do not acknowledge the message. Daniel nodded, but the fear in his eyes only grew. What if ignoring him makes things worse, he asked. I shook my head. Responding would make it worse. He wants to pull you in. He wants to know what you know. He wants control, and the moment you answer, he thinks he has it. Daniel exhaled shakily. I don't understand why he is doing this now. Why come here? Why contact me? I looked at him with steady eyes. Because your father's message changes everything. He knows the truth has resurfaced. He knows you heard it. And he knows it could expose everything he worked to bury. Elena sat on the arm of the sofa, clutching her hands together. What if he tries to hurt us? What if he tries to silence Daniel the same way he silenced your husband? I turned toward her. We are not going to panic. Panic is exactly what he relies on. We will stay calm. We will stay alert. And we will not let fear make decisions for us. Daniel looked up suddenly as another message arrived. This one was longer. Ignoring me is a mistake. We should meet. There are things you need to understand about your father. My chest tightened. He is trying to manipulate you, Daniel. He wants to twist the truth before you can understand it. Daniel read the message again, his expression darkening. He's trying to turn this on you, he said. He wants me to think you lied about everything. I nodded. Yes. Because keeping you confused keeps him safe. Daniel placed the phone face down on the table as if refusing to let it have power over him anymore. He rubbed his hands over his face. I can't believe any of this is happening. Yesterday, all I cared about was making sure the wedding decorations were perfect. Now, everything feels like it's falling apart. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Sometimes truth arrives like a storm. It destroys what is weak, but it clears what needs to be rebuilt. Daniel looked at me with tired eyes. Mom, I need to know who my father really was. Not the version I built out of anger. Not the version I imagined. The truth. All of it. I nodded. Then we start at the beginning. He sat back down on the sofa, and Elena sat beside him holding his hand tightly. I began speaking slowly, choosing each word with care. Your father was a good man, Daniel. But goodness alone doesn't protect someone from corruption. He wanted to help families who were struggling financially. He believed in transparency. He believed people deserved honesty. That was why he joined the organization. But he did not realize that behind the charity events and outreach programs were people using donations for personal gain. When he discovered that the organization was hiding large sums of money, he confronted them. And that confrontation is what put him in danger. Daniel leaned forward. Why didn't he leave the organization immediately? Why didn't he take us and run? I sighed. Because he believed the threat would follow us. Because the people involved had influence and connections. Leaving wouldn't stop them. And at the time he thought protecting the witness was more important than fleeing. Daniel blinked in confusion. The witness. The person he said he was protecting. Was the witness part of the organization too? I nodded. Yes. The witness was someone who saw things they shouldn't have. Someone who wanted to expose the truth. Someone who trusted your father. Daniel sat silently for a moment, processing everything. Then he looked up again. Mommy said the witness disappeared after he died. Do you think the organization found them? I hesitated. I don't know. But your father believed that as long as the witness stayed hidden, you and I would be safe. Daniel lowered his head. He was carrying all of that alone. While I blamed you, while I pushed you away, I placed my hand on his arm. Grief makes people blind, Daniel. Anger makes people deaf. You were hurting, and you needed someone to blame. You were too young to understand the weight he carried. He nodded slowly. Tears streamed down his face. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you force me to listen? Because forcing you would have pushed you further from me. You were not ready. And your father believed that if you learned the truth before you could handle it, the danger would follow you too. Daniel took a deep breath. I feel like everything I believed about him, everything I believed about you, everything I believed about myself was built on a lie. I shook my head. Not a lie. A misunderstanding. A gap left by silence. Silence can be as dangerous as deception. But now the silence is broken. Now you have the truth. That is something not everyone gets in life. Elena looked from Daniel to me. What do we do now? Daniel rubbed his forehead, thinking hard. We need to know everything in the recording. Every detail. Every hint. Maybe there's something we missed. I nodded. Then let's listen again. This time together. Daniel hesitated, but then picked up the phone and played the recording from the beginning. His father's voice filled the room. A voice steady but strained. A voice carrying love and urgency. A voice that had crossed the barrier of death to tell the truth. We sat in silence, listening to every sentence, every pause, every breath. When the recording reached the final lines, Daniel paused it. "Mom," he whispered. The part where he said, "Don't trust the one who stands closest." "He didn't mean you."
"Of course not," I said.
"He meant someone inside the organization. Someone he once trusted. Someone who knew too much." Daniel stood again, pacing slowly. But what if there is more? What if there's something he wanted to say, but couldn't? Something he expected us to figure out. I watched him closely. "What are you thinking, Daniel?" He stopped at the window, looking out at the street. "I keep thinking about the witness. If the witness is still alive, they may know everything. They may know who threatened him. They may know what he was trying to expose." I nodded. "That is possible. But finding them after all these years won't be easy." Daniel turned toward me, a determined look forming in his eyes. "Then we find out who they were."
"We start there."
I studied him. The fear in him was still present, but something new had emerged. Strength. Purpose. Resolve. He was no longer the boy who rejected me at the wedding gate. He was a man stepping into truth, even though it terrified him. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. All three of us froze. Daniel walked slowly into the hallway. I followed close behind. Elena clutched her hands together. Daniel reached the door, hesitated, then opened it. A small envelope lay on the doorstep. No sender. No name. He picked it up with trembling fingers and opened it. Inside was a single note. "Stop searching." Daniel looked at me, his voice shaking. "He knows." Daniel stood frozen in the doorway, staring at the note as if the paper itself were poisonous. Elena covered her mouth with both hands, the fear in her eyes turning sharper by the second. I stepped forward slowly, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding. "Daniel, come inside."
"Do not stand out there."
He obeyed, without speaking. He shut the door, locked it, and leaned his back against it as though trying to hold the world on the other side. The small note trembled between his fingers. "Stop searching." 2 words that carried far too much meaning. 2 words heavy enough to change everything. Elena whispered, "What does that mean?" Daniel looked at her, then at me. "It means he is watching. It means he knows we listened to the recording. It means he knows we are asking questions." His voice broke slightly. "It means he knows we are thinking about the witness." I stepped closer and took the note from his hand. The paper was thick, not torn from a notepad, but printed cleanly. That detail alone made my stomach twist. This was not a message left in panic or haste. It was carefully planned. Someone had approached the house. Someone stood at our doorstep. Someone bold enough to send a warning without hiding. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, pacing across the living room. What does he want from us? Why is he doing this? I watched him, trying to steady the tremble in my own hands. Because he wants control, Daniel. Because for years he believed the truth died with your father. Because the moment you listened to that recording, you became a threat. Your father left behind a secret. And now that secret has been awakened. Elena stepped to Daniel, gripping his arm. "We need to call the police.
Now."
Daniel shook his head bitterly. "And tell them what?" "That a man showed up last night, then left a note. That my father warned us 20 years ago. They will think we're losing our minds. And even if they believed us, it wouldn't matter. The people involved had influence back then.
Who knows how many still do."
I placed a hand on his shoulder.
"Daniel, listen to me.
Fear is what gives men like him power. If he sees fear, he will push harder. If he sees panic, he will escalate. But if he sees clarity, courage, and unity, he will hesitate." Daniel sat on the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "I am trying, Mom, but everything feels upside down. Yesterday, I thought my biggest problem was whether the band played the wrong song. Now we have someone from Dad's past threatening us." I sat next to him. The truth has a way of breaking what is fragile, so it can reveal what is real. Daniel lifted his head, slowly meeting my eyes. Mom, who was the witness? Who was Dad protecting? I hesitated because the truth was tangled and uncertain. Your father never gave a name. He believed that if he kept the identity hidden even from me, it would protect us. Daniel took a deep breath. Then we need to find out who that person was. That's the only way to understand why Dad risked everything. I nodded. Then we begin with what we know. He thought for a moment. Dad mentioned that the witness was someone vulnerable, someone who trusted him. Someone who was afraid. I added someone who had information valuable enough to put them in danger. Daniel looked at the floor, lost in thought. He stood and walked to the cabinet where the wedding gifts were still piled. He opened a drawer and removed a small box. Inside were the documents and old photos he had kept from his childhood. Maybe something here will tell us something, he murmured. He placed them on the table, and together we sorted through the pieces of his past. Photos of his father smiling. Documents from his old job. Letters.
Cards.
Nothing at first seemed unusual. Then Daniel pulled out an old envelope with his father's handwriting on it. The paper was yellowed with age. The envelope had never been opened. I felt my breath tighten. Mom, he whispered, why is this sealed? I stared at the handwriting. I don't know, Daniel. Maybe he hid it. Maybe he planned to give it to you, but never had the chance. Daniel carefully opened the envelope and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. There were only 2 lines written on it. If anything happens, look for the one who left first. Trust them. They know the truth. Daniel looked at me confused. Who left first? My heart raced. I remembered someone. A woman who worked with his father. Quiet.
Kind.
Always nervous. She disappeared a few days before Daniel's father collapsed. I whispered her name. Rebecca. Daniel lifted his head. Rebecca.
Who was she?
Someone your father respected deeply. Someone who was afraid. Someone who vanished without explanation. Daniel stood suddenly. Then she was the witness. She must have been. His voice carried a spark of hope and fear. If she is alive, she might know everything. Elena approached slowly. But how do we find her after all these years? Daniel looked determined. We start with what we know. We check old records, old addresses, anything. I nodded. But we must be careful. If that man learns we are searching for her, he will escalate. Daniel sat again, rubbing his forehead. Mom, what if the note means he already knows? I looked down at the small piece of paper. He knows we're thinking. But he doesn't know what we know. He doesn't know about Rebecca's letter. He doesn't know that your father left a clue. That gives us time. Daniel nodded slowly, but fear lingered in his eyes. Elena touched his arm. We will get through this. Daniel whispered, I hope so. But before we could speak further, the tone of the house shifted. A loud knock echoed at the door. Not gentle. Firm. Demanding. All 3 of us stiffened. Daniel whispered, did he come back? I shook my head. Too bold, too soon. But boldness was his trademark. Daniel approached the door cautiously. Who is it, he called. No answer. He looked at us and opened the door a few inches, keeping the chain locked.
There was no one at the doorstep this time.
Only another envelope. Smaller than the first. Daniel picked it up, his hands shaking. He brought it inside and placed it on the table.
Open it, Mom, he said.
I nodded and took the envelope. This one was even more deliberate. The paper thicker. The edges cleaner. Inside was a single photocopy. An old newspaper clipping. The headline chilled me. Woman missing after charity investigation. Beneath the headline, a faded photo. Rebecca. Daniel stared at the image in shock. Mom, he whispered. She's gone. She disappeared. My voice was low. And now someone wants us to remember that. Daniel paced the room, breathing hard. This is a warning. He's telling us to stop. He's telling us he knows exactly where we are looking. I held the paper, feeling the weight of the past pressing into my hands. Daniel watched me, as though expecting me to break. Instead, something inside me hardened. Your father died, trying to protect the truth, I said. We cannot run from it anymore. Daniel swallowed hard. Mom, what if we are putting ourselves in danger? I looked at him steadily. Danger has already found us. But truth is the only thing that can free us from it. Daniel took a deep breath. Then we keep going. He looked at me with resolve. We find out what really happened. We find Rebecca. We uncover what Dad knew. And we make sure the man who threatened him cannot keep hiding. Elena stood beside him, her voice stronger now. We stand together. None of us faces this alone. I felt a warmth in my chest even through the fear. For the first time in years, Daniel and I were united not by pain, but by purpose. Before we moved forward, I whispered one truth aloud. This is what your father wanted. Daniel nodded, his eyes steady. Then let's finish what he started. But before we could take another step, Daniel's phone lit up again. A new message. This time only one word. Enough. Daniel stared at the screen as the single word glowed back at him. Enough. It was not just a warning. It was a command. A reminder that someone was watching every step we took. Elena moved closer to him, placing her hand on his arm. Daniel, this is getting worse. We need to be careful. He nodded, still staring at the message. His voice was low and tense. He's trying to scare us into silence. But we're already past the point of going back. I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Daniel, listen to me. Fear is his weapon. But truth is ours. Remember that. He looked at me with haunted eyes. Mom, what if the truth is more dangerous than the lies? I answered quietly. Then that is even more reason to bring it into the light. Lies survive in darkness. Truth survives anywhere. Daniel took a deep breath and placed the phone on the table. Elena stood behind him, as if trying to shield him from the weight of the world. For a moment the room fell completely silent. Then Daniel spoke again. We need to know what happened to Rebecca. If she disappeared after talking to Dad, then she is the missing piece. She might have left evidence. She might have told someone something. We need to follow her trail. I nodded but added caution. We must move quietly. No calls. No messages. No online searches that can be easily traced. We start with memories. Your father's notes. Anything that might point to where she went when she vanished. Daniel opened the small box again, removing more old documents. Papers scattered across the table. Receipts. Meeting agendas. Handwritten notes from his father. As we looked through them, the tension in the house grew heavier. Then Elena picked up a folded piece of paper that looked different from the rest. Daniel, this looks important. He opened it carefully. Inside were names. A list handwritten by his father. Some were crossed out. Some underlined. And next to Rebecca's name, there was a small mark. A circle. Daniel pointed to it. Mom, what does that mean? I studied it. Your father used to mark people he trusted with circles. People he believed were loyal. Daniel took a slow breath. Then she trusted him. And he trusted her. That confirms she was the witness. Elena leaned closer. There is an address written here. But it is crossed out. Daniel read it quietly. It was not far from where we lived years ago. Mom, do you think she lived there? I nodded. She might have. Or she might have hidden there before running. Daniel folded the paper and put it in his pocket. Then that is where we start. We go there.
Today.
I hesitated. Daniel, it may not be safe. That man may expect that. He may be watching for that exact move. Daniel met my eyes. Mom, everything we do is a risk now. But we cannot run from the truth. Not anymore. Before I could respond, there was a soft knock at the back door. All three of us froze. Daniel exchanged a look with me and walked slowly toward the kitchen. The knock came again.
Soft.
Hesitant. Not the same firm, demanding knock from before. Daniel whispered, "Who is it?" No one answered. He approached the door quietly and looked through the small window. A woman stood outside, trembling in the cold. Her clothes were worn. Her eyes looked tired, as if she had not slept in days. Daniel stared for a moment, then turned to me in shock.
Mom.
I think this is her. My breath caught. Rebecca. He unlocked the door and pulled it open. The woman stepped inside, looking over her shoulder in fear. She spoke in a strained whisper. I shouldn't be here, but I had no choice.
He knows you are searching for me.
Daniel stepped closer. You are Rebecca. She nodded slowly. Her voice cracked when she spoke.
Yes.
Your father told me to come to you if anything ever happened. And when I heard the news, when I heard you had listened to the recording, I knew it was time. Elena helped her to a chair. Rebecca looked exhausted, as if she had been running for years. Daniel knelt beside her. What happened to you? Why did you disappear? Rebecca closed her eyes, gathering strength. Your father protected me. I was the one who collected documents showing the corruption inside the organization. When they found out, I confided in him because I trusted him. He hid me for weeks. He made sure I had food, a place to stay. But they discovered he was helping me. She paused, her voice breaking. They threatened him. They told him that if he didn't tell them where I was, they would come for his family. Daniel swallowed hard. So he lied to protect you and us. Rebecca nodded.
Yes.
And he paid the price. After he died, I knew I had to disappear. If I stayed, someone would find me. They wanted the documents I collected. They wanted my silence. So I ran. I hid in different towns, moving constantly.
But then I saw the man at your wedding.
I saw his car. And I knew he was watching your family again. Daniel stood, his voice shaking with anger. He was at my wedding. Rebecca nodded.
Yes.
He was there long before you saw him. I froze. That meant he had anticipated our moves long before the message had been delivered. Rebecca continued. When your father died, I tried to contact the authorities. But no one believed me. Or maybe they were told not to listen. She wiped her eyes. I promised your father that if danger ever reached you, I would come forward. And now it has. Daniel sat beside her. Do you still have the documents? Rebecca hesitated, then reached into her coat. She pulled out a small flash drive. This is everything. Copies of everything I collected. Bank statements.
Names.
Locations. Conversations. Enough to expose them. Enough to bring them down. But it is dangerous. If they learn you have it, they will not stop. Daniel took the drive with shaking hands. Mom, he whispered. This is what Dad died protecting. I felt tears burn behind my eyes. Yes, Daniel. This is the truth. The full truth. Rebecca looked at him with urgency. You need to be careful who you trust. Do not bring this to the local police. You need someone with real authority. Someone outside their reach. Daniel exhaled slowly. We need time to think.
To plan.
Rebecca nodded. And you do not have much. He will not stop until he gets this back. I placed a hand on Daniel's arm. We need to leave this house. It is no longer safe. Daniel agreed immediately. We pack essentials now. And we move quietly. Elena got up quickly and headed to the bedroom to gather things. Before Daniel stood, I held his face gently.
Daniel, listen to me.
Your father believed in you. He trusted that one day you would finish what he started. And now the truth is in your hands. Do not shrink from it. Do not fear it. Daniel nodded, his eyes filled with determination. I won't, Mom. Not anymore. We stood together, Daniel, Rebecca, and I, as the weight of the past settled into the present. A storm was coming, but we were no longer running. We were ready to face it. And the man who tried to silence the truth would soon learn one undeniable fact. The truth your father died to protect was finally alive. And it was coming for him.